for genetic study. We know that bovine cellular structure is so similar to man's that it can be tested and get positive results for humans. What would this be all about? Why would an extraterrestrial race, a race that was from many light years away, be abducting all of these people and all of the cattle, not to mention a few goats and whatnot? Now, is it possible that this would be the case for a race that was coming to visit planet Earth, or would this be a case of a race that maybe existed on planet Earth? Could it be that some of the aliens that we think are actually extraterrestrial are subterrestrial? Perhaps even submariner. Certainly, most of the first UFO encounters were by the Navy of UFO craft coming up out of the ocean, or what they called USOs. We have lots of tales of aliens in connection with water, and even the Amazon is one of the main hotspots for extraterrestrial or UFO activity. But are they extraterrestrial? That's the question. When we start looking around and we find the Nazis are building UFOs as well, then we have the man-made hypothesis. We have a lot to sort out when it comes to these stories. And when what we get for our disclosure are these pilots, these officials telling us their tales of craft that have come and gone, with no real tales of the inhabitants of these crafts, no real stories, although they do come. They do talk of captured EBEs and their inevitable death in our cages. We do talk of connections with Eisenhower and his mysterious toothache when he was flown perhaps to another military base to meet with the extraterrestrials, to make a contract with them about the abductions of human race. And when we look to the Greys, we definitely see what appears to be more of a demonic type scenario. And this would bring us back to the fourth kind. This idea of possession by aliens. I cannot believe that if aliens were here and were visiting from some distant star, that they would need to abduct as many people and cows as has been going on for the last 50 years. And yet I believe that this is going on because the abundance of evidence to suggest so. Now, most of these men have been held at a 50-year contract before they could release their data. Some data will never be released. But it's time now for them to start to release that data. And so in this bent, the UN has announced an ambassador for ETs. And yet you find that they're already backtracking on this. This is when Othman was given this job, a 58-year-old Malaysian astrophysicist, Mazlan Othman, head of the UN's Office for Outer Space Affairs, which is charged with promoting international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space. Now, as they announced that Miss Othman was going to become this ET ambassador, she quickly backtracked and started to say, no, thank you for the honor, but I need to turn this down. Now, she led Malaysia's National Space Agency before heading to the UN and helped train the country's first astronaut. And she's scheduled next week to be speaking at the Royal Society event, where in this she announced that she would not be the one to greet E.T. when he arrived, but yet would be there to discuss near-Earth objects. So now we're back to our SS officer, Werner von Braun. So here she is going to meet with the Royal Society on the idea that she's coming to deal with near-Earth objects, and yet the very meeting that she's going to is dealing with extraterrestrial contact. Looking for the full disclosure on this. sometimes all of my posts. And if you want to follow along and keep up with these news stories, go over to freemantv.com and check out the Space War News. You'll find it up in the top right-hand corner. Or over at the freemanperspective.blogspot.com, where you'll find it just on the right-hand side. So I was looking for a bit more into her. Okay, so the Australian had learned that the recent quote from Othman says, "The continued search for extraterrestrial communication sustains the hope that someday humankind will receive signals from extraterrestrials. When we do, we should have in place a coordinated response that takes into account all the sensitivities related to the subject. The UN is a ready-made mechanism for such coordination." Imagine that. So they attempted to get Othman to join and become this alien ambassador, but she passed up on it, and instead is going to show up for the meeting, which has to do with everything to do with contact with extraterrestrials. But she says, no, I'm there to talk about near-Earth objects. So we're watching this unfold, and is it too obvious? Is this too simple, where we watch it unfold, where we see it go from the Red Scare to terrorists to asteroids to aliens? Now, Apophis is back in the news. Discovery Channel is working on making an Apophis documentary about the discovery of Apophis. And at the same time, they have the ET disclosure going on. We find that it seems to be just too simple of a script. For me, it's just too simple. But yet, how can we deny what is going on when we start to see all of the news coming out? We have this recent UN with the nukes and UFOs. We have the Funes coming and talking about baptizing ETs. And then NASA getting on board with their Rothschild. And believe it or not, I had all of these stories open and put to my space. And now, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, she was actually a major fundraiser for Hillary Clinton, and then was a major backer of John McCain. She comes out and is now set up to be discussing the innovations of space and contact with extraterrestrials. So NASA scientists to speak about extraterrestrial life. Dr. Lynn Rothschild, NASA scientist, will present innovations in space discovery. Is there life out there? That'll be on Wednesday at 7 p.m. at the Living Legends Conference. The lecture is open to many distinguished speakers, and Rothschild is an evolutionary biologist, astrobiologist at NASA Ames Research Center, and a professor at Stanford and Brown University. Now, Stanford and the SRI, they've been popping up again and again in the contacts with extra-dimensional beings, or the what is known as the Ennead, the Nine. And now we have this NASA connection with a Rothschild making her way into the ET conference. So she is one of the scientists who started the shift of emphasis away from just looking for radio signals from intelligent beings. As a biologist, she has led the community of astrobiologists into exploring other questions, like what are the habitat limits of life? Now, we're finding life all over the universe. We're finding it, well, all over the planet, under ice, under miles of ice, deep down in the ocean. We can find that life can exist in nearly any environment. So what is the most acid, hottest temperature, coldest temperature, driest, least oxygen, most pressure that bacterial cells can stand? We find that this goes deep, deep down, and that we can find life in almost every environment. So it was assumed that the cosmos is brimming with civilizations that would be broadcasting radio signals. We, meaning the humans of planet Earth, have been broadcasting radio signals all over the place. I'm hoping ET picks up this show. I hope they're out there listening. So it is now an interdisciplinary science, the goal of learning about the origins of life and what the conditions that promote it. So NASA on the same end as the Vatican's ET conference, which has just come out and are about to release their results. And hopefully we can watch all of this and catch up on all of the things that are being put out and promoted through the Rothschild, UN, Vatican information center, right? Because that's where all of this is coming from. Royal Society, UN, Vatican. And we have to start to wonder why they want to promote this idea of ET. What would it do if ET showed up on the White House lawn? What would your reaction be? We'll be back in a minute. Some people look at this alien image as if we're dealing with a dimensional shift. The question often comes, are the aliens material or extra-dimensional? We have enough evidence to suggest both. We have enough evidence to wonder. We don't know whether aliens exist at all, but we see a lot of evidence to suggest this is the case. As we start to look into the spectrum of life on planet Earth, we find that we have these occult leaders in the UN, in the Vatican, in the White House, that are practicing occult rituals that I can determine to be extraterrestrial in origin. Now, is it possible that these priestcraft, such as the Freemasons, the Jesuits, the Zionists, actually have an extraterrestrial bent to them? Now, we could look clearly at the connections between Masonry and Mormonism and see that Joseph Smith had absolutely adopted the Masonic rites and rituals, even to the point where he disclosed that he had brought the brilliancy back to the Freemasonic rituals, that the true purpose and meaning of these rituals had been lost. And he was contacted by an call it angelic being, Moroni, an ET, an extra-dimensional being, to give him the story of life of planet Earth and give him the proper meanings of the rituals that the Freemasons were performing. When we look to this story and we find that the Mormons themselves have an extraterrestrial creation myth coming from the planet Kolob, where God lives, and bringing this to planet Earth, we have more to this puzzle than we can imagine. Now we have the story of the Ennead, the nine that are channeled by the elite of the world. And we have the concept of an agenda that seems to be unfolding over millennia. We have tales of extraterrestrials going back to the 14th century and beyond. We have cave paintings of aliens and alien craft. Now, one person, Anthony Kane, is a black American who is a relative of Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a former recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, just like our president. And he was reported a continuing contactee of a representative of an apparent extraterrestrial hyperdimensional governance authority known as the Council of 12. He delivered a number of specific datelines and predicted developments concerning a dimensional shift which Earth and human consciousness is now undergoing in relationship with the year of 2012. It's believed by Mr. Kane that the dates from December 12th, 2012 to December 21st, 2012 will bring about a split in the dimensional frequencies of planet Earth. That humans with a consciousness anchored in fear will remain in the third dimension, while individuals who are experiencing this consciousness awakening will be putting into another dimension. This is a very similar